Okay, everybody. I know time is valuable, so I want to be sure to honor your time. We're going to try to go fast and furious, my school friends, because you have students and parents and teachers to serve. So let's get through this information. We are recording this so that we can share it with our friends in the schools who were not able to join us. Because we know that, life's unpredictable doing the jobs that you guys are doing. I will take questions and I'll stay on up until 9 Eastern time. And then we were going to post this and give everybody access to it later. So if you have questions as I go, please go ahead and drop your questions into the chat, and I will be sure to get questions. We did this in meeting mode, so if you want to ask a question verbally, you can go ahead and raise your virtual hand down below, and I'll be sure to let you guys can unmute yourselves. You can ask me questions, but let's do this for the sake of time. Let me get as much information as possible about what's coming. I have some slides for you all, and then I'll go ahead and take some questions. So like I said, we're recording for those of you that are just joining now. We will provide this. I will take your questions at the end. Hopefully, the questions that you already have in your mind, I have already prepared for on the slides. Fingers crossed that I was able to anticipate what you guys want to know. So let me get my slides up real quick. And let me get my participants up because I know we're going to have people joining us throughout. For those of you who have not been with me before, I literally have like mission control, 3 different screens going. So sometimes it can be a lot to navigate. While I'm talking, if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and then I will get to it when we do the Q&A portion at the end. Okay, changes are coming. It's been a few years since we've had changes with the ACT and SAT, most notably 2014. The old SAT was thrown out. They had an all new SAT for us, and they're doing it again. So we're going to talk about that and about what's going on at ACT. My goal is by the end of our time together today, you're going to know what's new, what's staying the same, and how we recommend you best advise your students to navigate what can feel like, waves coming at them. They've got a lot on them, not only academically and extracurricularly, but for those college-bound students, there's a lot of spinning plates with very real deadlines that they have to hit. As an independent college counselor myself, one of my goals is that students don't have things piling up on them so that they feel buried at any time. And there really is a strategic timeline to avoid students getting overwhelmed. You guys are sacrificing something to be here. You could be interacting with students, doing things to positively impact them. This is something that will positively impact them. So let's make our time together count. I've got my ringer off on my phone. I've got it face down so I don't have any distractions. I see lots of familiar names, and I also know that I've got some people here who we probably haven't had the pleasure of meeting before. So just real briefly, we are LEAP. That is our company. We are in the greater Cincinnati area. We began supporting students in 1999. I was a former high school teacher. I have my master's in educational administration. And so this is our 25th school year. We have been providing academic tutoring, so chemistry, math, English. We have been providing test prep for students, and for students who show up and do the work, we guarantee that they will improve their ACT or SAT. I've been an expert featured in Forbes, US News, Fox Business, and Money Magazine. Our team are all educators and parents. I have 3 kids in their 20s, and I have 2 bonus kids. So we have 5 kids, 22 to 32. So I know what parents are feeling. And our client relationship manager, she's taken 3 kids through our program. She's got a 4th still in high school. So we get it when we're talking to families. We understand. And our purpose, our calling is to support families to get the overwhelm banished for teens. It's not 100% possible, but we try really hard at that, and to partner with schools. Many of you that are on today are our school partners. Okay, let's talk test content. So the concepts and the content that both of these tests are evaluating for our students is not really changing that much. When it comes to English, our kiddos still have to be grammar ninjas. They have to be able, through a multiple choice format, be able to navigate knowing good writing. They need to be able to recognize transitions and topics, but is all in a multiple choice format. SAT no longer has the essay. ACT still has it. And the reason the ACT still has the physical writing of an essay is not in Ohio, but there are some states and some districts where they still use that essay for a graduation test, right? And most notably, the U.S. Military Academy, West Point, they still are using the essay portion of the ACT. So if you have students interested in military service academies, I would recommend that when they test outside of our school day testing, that they do take that essay. Otherwise, they don't really need it. We don't advise anybody else to take it at this point. So the concepts that, I'm gonna make sure we have everybody muted. Okay, the concepts that they are testing on English are the same. Math, it's still math through Algebra 2. SAT still has less of a focus on geometry. And one of the changes to test content is the previous PSAT, the current SAT that's being retired in December, those have had a no calculator section. And that always surprised kids. And I'm like, hey, don't let that throw you for a loop, because here's the deal. A lot of those questions you're going to move through more quickly if you're not dependent on a calculator. You can do this. Well, the SAT, the new SAT, will be, you're allowed to use a calculator anytime on the math section. Okay, reading. Here's what we see changing. And I bold the vocabulary piece, because if you remember the previous SAT, for those of you who have been at it as long as I have, or you started before 2014, the previous SAT had a big emphasis on vocabulary, and they de-emphasized that with the SAT that came about in 2014. Well, they are going back to, while there's a lot of things changing with the test, we're seeing a renewed emphasis on vocabulary on the SAT, okay? The reading level and hard words, again, words that kids are not using for sure, and many of them are not seeing. Reading is their friend to develop great vocabulary, but we have a hard time convincing students of that, right? Okay, science. SAT still, while they won't have a dedicated science section like the ACT, they will still have embedded data interpretation across all sections, the English, the reading, and the math of the SAT. So the skills that a student has to use to look at schematic, critically think about it, pull out what's important, those skills are still used, but there's still no dedicated science section. Those types of questions on the ACT appear on the science section. On the SAT, those types of questions are going to be spread throughout all sections. So the concepts that your kids are learning in the classroom and being evaluated on, yes, those are still the same. But let's talk about what's changing. The SATs having the biggest number of changes. Let's talk about that next. What's coming at us? Okay, so it's a new digital adaptive SAT, and it's going to debut next year. The very last SAT, paper SAT, will be December of this year. It will be then gone forever. The first digital adaptive SAT is going to be in March 2024. Okay, it's already debuted internationally. One thing that we do at LEAP, I'm a presenter at the National Test Prep Association. It is the national program for those who are offering test prep. I presented at the conference in June and attended many sessions, and we actually heard directly from College Board and ACT at this conference. Okay, so we are attending lots of professional development to know what's coming. And College Board is not the most transparent organization, while ACT tends to be very transparent. So what does it mean to be digital adaptive? Here's what it means. And this goes for the PSAT as well. So if those of you that are giving the PSAT, the digital adaptive PSAT you will give in October. And what's different about the digital PSAT is now you can give it any date. You choose your date in October. What we found from our school partners is most of you are sticking with that second Wednesday in October for giving that, for those of you that are choosing to give it or giving the students the option. That it's going to be the same thing. Like the format's still going to be the same. There's going to be an English, a reading, and a math section. So now there's like 3 sections. The no calculator section, bye-bye. It's still gone on the digital PSAT as well. Now, what does it mean to be digital adaptive? It means that everybody gets the first section the same difficulty. Now, 2 students sitting next to one another are going to have different questions. Okay, so my question 1 is not going to be, Jeannie, I see you're on with us today, is not going to, from Fenwick, that's not going to be the same question 1. So the test, this eliminates some cheating opportunities, right? And let me say, like, that was born out of a lot of cheating on the international test, not so much here in the US. And that's why they moved to digital adaptive testing internationally before they did it here in the States. And cheating's a problem. We know that. And it's actually been more of a problem since COVID, not just on these tests, but in the classrooms that kids are in. So digital adaptive means everybody starts with the same level of difficulty. If you perform really, really well on that first set of questions, then the second set, the level of difficulty is going to ramp up. Okay, you're going to have a different level of difficulty that you're going to have to navigate. And that this is true of all 3 sections: English, reading, I think they're still calling it language and writing, but English, reading, and math. So standard, based on performance there, that's going to predict the number of questions or the type of questions, difficulty level that you're going to get on the next one. So it makes it less predictable. Okay. And I could see some problems with that. Now, I want to remind everybody, ACT has had a fairly stable test all 25 years that we LEAP have been in business. They've made changes over the years. Writing was mandatory for everybody. Then they pulled it back. About 10 years ago, they went to one of the reading passages having 2 passages. So there's some compare and contrast there. We've seen the math difficulty on the ACT increase over the years for sure. We do item analysis on every ACT that's released. So let's talk about release test. ACT and SAT historically have been releasing 3 tests a year. Okay, 3 tests a year. Now, what happens is those tests are publicly released. They can be used by students for prep. They're used by us with our students for prep, so that students are getting practice on actual ACTs and actual SATs, not a company, I won't name any names, but not a company who tries to make mock ACTs and SATs and might miss the mark, right? So California and the state of New York have laws that say the ACT and the SAT must release 3 tests a year for truth in testing laws is what they're called. Well, the whole University of California system is now test blind. So students don't ever, even if they submit an ACT, they're not going to look at it. There are schools still in New York that want and are using tests. So California is not going to fight SAT, who now says we're no longer going to release our tests. We're going to break the law in California and in New York, and we're no longer releasing our tests. New York I think College Board's probably going to see a fight in the courts over this. That's what we are predicting in this industry. How it disadvantages students is there is really not a lot of transparency on the part of SAT as to what does the test look like. How are these questions formatted? We know this, gone are long reading passages, and they'll have like a shorter question, and on that shorter question, they're just answering one question, and then they go down next to the next little paragraph of reading, and then they answer a question. Doesn't mean these questions are going to be easier, my friends. I've seen samples. Some of them are a lot harder, okay? But the format of taking a digital test is different. So here's what SAT has said. They've got one digital PSAT available for practice, and they've got 5 digital SATs for practice, and that's it. They're saying right now they're not going to give any more transparency. And we really don't know yet how closely the released practice material from what they call the Blue Book, and there's a Blue Book app that goes with it. We're using those as we're prepping students for SAT, but we don't know how closely that's going to match up with reality, right? So it's kind of the Wild West of the SAT right now. There is also, College Board has admitted, and they and the colleges currently have no concordance from a 26 on the ACT is going to be a what on the digital SAT? We don't know. Where right now it's easy to concord old SAT to the new ACT or to the ACT. So it's really unpredictable right now. Historically, College Board does not do a good job of navigating change or being transparent for the consumers. And who are the consumers? They're the students that you are serving and that we are serving. So because of this Wild West, couple things. One, we deconstructed our ACT, SAT Prep Essentials course. We no longer have confidence that having both of them, even though the concepts that are being tested are still largely the same, we no longer have confidence that these two can be prepped in tandem. So over the summer, we didn't rewrite our curriculum, but we extracted everything SAT. So for students who choose to prep for the digital SAT, we're still focusing on the same content. We're going to practice with what we do have, but we're really going to focus on content and how they're navigating the test and doing on, like, how are you doing on those Algebra 2 questions? How are you doing on grammar? What do we need to hit hard content-wise? So our group course is now ACT Prep Essentials. SAT is only served with us right now, one-on-one. In the future, when we feel we have confidence to go back and have a group course for SAT, it will be apart from ACT. And because of the lack of transparency and the lack of materials, and the fact that the vast majority, over 95% of Ohio high schools, choose the ACT as their state test, we really are recommending for students that they focus on the ACT right now instead of trying to, I liken taking the SAT right now as to, saying you're going to go to Key West on spring break and trying to do it without a map. It's just, there's no way to do it, right? So reality is, if we look statistically at students, 50% of students historically, it's a toss-up. They're going to do equally well on the ACT and the SAT. About 25% are going to be better suited to the ACT, and 25% are going to be better suited to the SAT. So with that, 75% of students still are probably going to be served, and we don't have all the data yet, but still going to be served well with just an ACT focus. And we still offer a diagnostic SAT. We still offer tutoring for those 25% who are going to be better suited with the digital SAT. And you know what, we're saying, like, the data shows us that, but maybe they aren't. And I think it's going to be harder to increase SAT scores given the lack of transparency in materials. Okay, let's talk about ACT now. ACT, the online ACT option is coming in 2024. The pilot of it, so it's interesting what they told us at the conference and what's happening right now with registration is a little bit different. So let's talk about this. They told us at the conference and have continued to tell us with our ACT reps that they are piloting the online ACT in December 2023. Now, let me say something. It is the same online ACT that has been available to you all for state testing for years, since like 2017, I think it was. So this is the same test paper, same test online. It is not a digital adaptive. It's the same test. It's still English, math, reading, science, same content, same number of questions. It's the same test. It's the same option that you guys have had for years for state testing. They just have not offered it for Saturday testing. ACT also tells us they remain committed to students having choice. So they are going to continue. Oh, let me back up one quick thing about the SAT. If your student is getting testing accommodations, then they will be taking an SAT pencil to paper. That's the only time that you would be able to do that. Okay, now with this online ACT option, same test, same everything. ACT remains committed to paper option and online option. They are not going to go the direction of only having one or the other. They've told us that they will have a very slow rollout with limited availability throughout 2024. And quite frankly, it's going to be up to you all that host the ACT whether you want to offer the online option. And there's tech issues with that, right? You have to have confidence that you have the ability, you've got the infrastructure, the technical infrastructure of computers and Wi-Fi and security and all of the things to offer this. It could be a great option. And so it's really going to be in your hands. I'm going to tell you in a second what schools we've discovered are already stepping up to offer this. So we've revised our curriculum. Like I said, we extracted from our curriculum everything SAT. It's only served to our students via one-on-one tutoring at this point. Our group course and the curriculum we use for ACT prep now includes strategies and practice, URL, actual practice we send them to do timed. They can do timed and untimed on the ACT. Now, the only thing we're trying to do with that is for a kid who's going to take the online ACT, we want to make them comfortable with the testing experience. How we prep, what we focus on, content-wise, getting scores up, that remains the same. What we're advising students is, if and when possible, test in the same format as your high school is going to be offering your state ACT. That's what we advise students to do. Now, let's talk about registration. This is a screenshot. I took it actually earlier this week. When your students log in to the ACT registration area, they get this pop-up that it's now available in limited areas. So when they said, oh, we're going to pilot it in December, the way they originally set that up led us to believe that they were going to handpick some schools and then they were going to handpick some kids, and that would be the pilot. Well, that's not true, because what we found is, so when your student logs in, it'll say, are you looking for online or are you looking for paper, right? What type of a testing center do you want? So your testing center has to offer one or the other, not both. Now, it's easily to navigate. They could say, like, show me the online options, and they go, oh my gosh, there's very few options. And then they just back up, and then they go paper, and then they can go see a plethora of options. Here's what we found. We were surprised that Milford High School is a, quote, pilot, or maybe they just opted to do this for the December test. I put in my zip code. I live in Landon, right next to Mason, like an eighth of a mile from Mason. So 11 miles from me, there is right now an opportunity for students to take the online ACT. If you have juniors who have already taken math up through Algebra 2, we actually encourage them to do their first attempt at the ACT before your state test. We're going to talk about state test on the next slide. And so if your high school is going to choose to do the online test, go grab those spots. If you're a junior who's already taken Algebra 2, go grab those spots at Milford, take that test in December, and then take the state test in February or March. And hopefully you're finished testing so you can focus on AP exams, ending with a strong GPA, your extracurriculars, and being ready to write essays and work on applications over the summer. So there's ease and breathing room, and things aren't piling up on top of the student. February, the only date that we saw Centerville through July offering the online ACT is for February. And a really good strategy for a lot of students who have taken, no matter where their math sequence is to do the February 10th ACT and then bam, immediately go into your state test. We see kids perform really well when that happens. So these are the only two options though right now, Hamilton and Centerville, unless some of you guys decide to step up for this. And so you can log in and see the options all the way through July. What we found is in the greater Cincinnati area, it's pretty much Centerville, Hamilton, and Milford who are listed as online testing options. We want to know from you if when you're offering the ACT, are you doing some online, some paper? Are you going to switch to all online? Because that helps us advise the families that you're serving and we're serving to give them good advice. Okay. Next up, let's talk state ACT. So here are the state spring ACT dates: February 27th, March 12th, March 26th, same as last year, guys. What we've seen from those of you that we've heard from, and if you're on and you've not let us know, go to the chat and say, hey, we know our ACT date, it's paper or it's online, and here's the date. We want to hear from you. That helps us serve your families. Sometimes we have a family that makes an assumption and they register for our group prep class that might end after your state test date. And we go back to them and say, hey, we know your high school told us that they're giving the test on this date and you're not going to be done with your prep course yet. Switch to one of our other options. The online is a series of windows. Please communicate and over communicate to your parents what you're doing. We had some parents last year, and there's the spring, the digital SAT. It's literally like, here's a window, pick your date. So if you choose to switch to the SAT, I don't think many schools are going to be switching to the SAT. We cannot over communicate enough the test date and the format to our families. We had some parents last year who got surprised that their high school had switched from paper testing to online. They felt it wasn't communicated well, and they were upset, not with us, but they were upset with the school. And I know you guys say it, you put it in newsletters, it's on your website. We can't say it enough because people tune out to what you're communicating, we're communicating. So if we all can work together, this will help students, which is the goal of all of us. State test dates are going to remain fair, consistent, the same. We don't see the testing calendar changing. So you've got the Saturday dates, and then we've got the state testing dates. ACT, no big change. SAT, another thing we can always remind families of is it's your job to register for the test outside of the state test date. I think because you guys take care of it for them for your state test date, then they make these wrong assumptions that you're going to take care of everything else. Still, colleges have no preference between the ACT and the SAT. I'm going to say one thing about test optional. Test optional, Purdue has gone back to requiring test scores last year. University of Tennessee did. If you see a date, like Miami says, we are test optional through, and I think right now it's 2025. That just means they're still evaluating. If they don't if it's open-ended, it's a commitment to probably staying test optional. What we found with admissions is students who meet institutional priorities, like they need a quarterback on the football team, then they don't expect test scores from them. We're seeing it's kind of all over the place, and it's really by college. So we encourage everybody to test, try to get the strongest scores possible. And then once you're finished testing and your college list for application is final, at that point you might decide like, oh, I am applying to Purdue. I'm going to obviously have to submit scores there, but I might make a different decision for Ohio State. So, okay, 9 o'clock, I did it. I can't believe I did it. I will stay on if anybody has any questions. I am going to upload the recording so that everybody can watch this, share it with their colleagues. Thank you for joining me. Do you guys have any questions at all? I'll stay on a sec. Just drop them in the chat if you do. I know it takes a second, or even raise your virtual hand and you can unmute. You don't even have to come on camera if you don't want to. Okay. Yes, who's unmuted? Go ahead.
I think that was me. Can you hear me? This is Debbie.
Hey,
Great information. Hi, how are you, Lisa?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. This is really great. This was super helpful and really good information. And I don't think I had given any thought to realizing we should really, for sure, let our parents and our families know what we're doing in March. So
Yes.
that's kind of a good heads up.
Yes, good. Any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So, like Debbie, you're serving the counseling department at your high school at King's. And so just like sharing this information with, maybe like Dana at central office,
Right.
your principal, being sure all your counselors get it. I'm going to run a transcript on this so that we even have the transcript. So some people would rather read it than watch a 30-minute video. So we will be sure to get that available to everybody.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I took a ton of notes and I am planning to summarize it and thought we should get that to a host of people, but I could always attach something else if you sent that as well. So
okay. My plan is we have to let this video process, and then I have to get it up today, and I'll email it out to you guys as soon as I have it ready.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Have a great weekend, everybody.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.